Hey, Malcolm.
Hey, Mario.
Good. So, where do we start? So there's still a deadlock at the Strait of Hormuz. Obviously, the
Yeah.
UK is sending a warship to the region, which we're going to talk about in a second. But there's one a piece of news that surprised me today, and my team posted about it, and they started with the following: Is Iran finally overplaying its hand? Iran already controls who gets to move oil and gas through the Strait of Hormuz. Now, according to Fars, the Iranian news outlet, it wants to do the same thing to the internet, forcing foreign cable companies to give permits, pay fees, and follow Iranian law just to keep their undersea cables running through the strait. Those cables carry around 15 to 20% of global internet and financial data between Europe, the Gulf, and Asia. So they want to control. They essentially want to control the Gulf. They control who comes in and out in terms of military presence from the US, the oil ships, the cargo ships, all the oil and export ships as well, import and export, and now the cables. That's a lot. Like, I don't know if that's a negotiating position, but that is a lot, Malcolm.
I think it's a leverage position, and I retweeted about that this morning, and I discussed it on my Substack podcast this morning. I think by coming out and identifying the risk to these fiber optic cables which go around the world, and people need to understand something. The internet that you get that goes through major data centers, very little of that is sent through satellite uplink and downlink. Very little. It goes through physical cables. Those physical cables replaced copper wire that was laid in the 1880s, 1890s around the world to handle Morse code traffic, then thicker bands of copper cables that handled telephony and things like that. And then basic data, right? Basic DA data went on for a long time, back until the 80s, late 80s, early 90s. In the 2000s, fiber optic, which is literally light, right? It's light cables. Fiber optic can handle trillions, Googles of more data than the old cables did. And even though you might see one that looks like a cord like this coming into your house, imagine that in a 1 foot wide bundle of a million lines like that on one cable that goes from a data center that relays it to another data center. So from, let's say, France, Paris to Marseille, right, to Algeria, it hops over to Egypt, then it cuts across, to a data center where there's a physical cable through, let's say, Saudi Arabia to Jeddah, all the way to ME1, which is one of those cables, and then goes on to Singapore, right? Ships laid this, data centers move it and amplify it, sort of like your Ethernet router in your house, right? Connected to other Ethernet cables. But that happened behind your back. Most of you don't understand that this just occurred. It was advancements in technology. There are 11 major, cables that are laid straight down the old central traffic separation scheme in the Strait of Hormuz. Not in the Iranian one to the north and not to the Omani one in the south. Straight down the old TSS, because they were laid by cable laying ships, just like they were in the 1850s, 1860s. Now they do it with fiber optic cable that is very thick, that can handle Googles upon Googles upon Googles of data. That data is connecting Asia, right? India, Pakistan, Singapore, China in some respects, Philippines, Australia, connecting them to Europe physically through fiber optics. So when you hit that keystroke, you take the laptop out, you hit that keystroke, in Australia, it shows up in Paris. Now, if those 11 cables or more, there's some smaller ones, are cut, and how do you cut them? You take an anchor on a ship, a cargo ship, not even a big one, and you fluked anchor and you drop it at the end of where those cables are, and you go south to north across those cables. You'll drag those cables and you will damage them or cut them. And we saw this happening with the Russians in the Baltics off of Finland and off of Sweden. that is one, very hard to replace. Two, you could blind Asia of the entire modern world.
That is
So that's
insane.
leverage.
How vulnerable. That is insane how vulnerable the global systems and economy is. Which makes this war even more stupid. Like even smaller militaries can just cause significant damage. The Houthis could have destroyed those cables as well.
Yeah.
They haven't opted for that from what I understand.
Yeah, well, that's because they benefit from it. But this is apocalypse scenario, right? This is the United States decides to do something crazy like start the war over. Iran starts losing advantage. Look, the Iranians aren't crazy. They want the internet. They need these systems also. They also know the benefit of allowing it to go and world trade to occur using this. On the other hand, this is the literal definition of asymmetric warfare. Asymmetric warfare is using the strengths of your enemy, in this case, being data superpowers, creating AI data centers where the world can think faster than you can blink your eye. Entire things can be created through AI, right? Moving faster than that. So your enemy's advantage is data. It's, believe it or not, more valuable than oil, more valuable than gold, platinum covered gold. Iran now understands it, those cables there. And what I think is fascinating is, as an intelligence planner, they kept their mouths shut about this. Not once during this war did they threaten this. Now that we're in negotiations about control of the SOH, and they have now monetized successfully, right? The multipass, it should call it an easy pass. Now it's going to be a multipass. The multipass will allow you to enter, will allow you to exit, and it'll allow you to continue having data without IRGC scuba divers going down and placing explosives on those cables and threatening to blow them up. This is Bond villain stuff, but it's a nation state doing it with another proxy that could do it and blind half of Africa, right? If they were to blow that up off of Yemen. I think this is the living definition of asymmetric warfare. Your strength is your greatest weakness now, when our small forces can impact you by just two guys who are out with oxygen tanks in a small boat and 10 pounds of plastic explosives.
Man, like, Iran is gonna control the Gulf if they get their way in these negotiations.
I think that, I always make this joke when I talk, and half of it's a joke, half of it's serious. I think that if you read the single best book about understanding this culture of trade, bargain, negotiate, betray, read 1001 Arabian Nights, right? The unexpurgated version, right? The raw Sir Richard Burton translation of that book. And you'll see that this has happened throughout all time. It's happened throughout that region forever, right? Sinbad the sailor, who was a Chinese sailor, right, came over to the Arabian Peninsula, right, and was kidnapped and had all these adventures and got into wars and had his junk burned to the ground, and then went back to China and came back as a negotiator and was threatened with beheading. All of this is going on right now over oil and fiber optic cables. There's very little, but every person is looking for a little bit more advantage than the next. So by Iran mentioning this, right, the asymmetric threat to fiber optic, and understanding that that is a 1,000 times more valuable than all the oil and natural gas that's coming out of the Persian Gulf, it shows that they are now applying those little pressure points that we talked about the other day, whereas U.S. is using raw, naked naval power, which we now find out is pretty much limited to 2 aircraft carriers, 3 destroyers, and air power, right? 3 destroyers is all they got to go back and forth through the Persian Gulf. The other ships can't do it. You got to protect the carriers. So they're running us ragged, right? We have sailors that have been out almost a year. They get to go home every night and go see their mom on weekends. They have many, many more levers of power that will impact the region, that will allow them to negotiate favorable trade, favorable neutrality in a future war with the Gulf states. This is no time to be absolutist by the Gulf states. There's a knife at their jugular.
Wow, man, I really, what a difficult position to be in for Trump now. What a difficult position to be in. Obviously, the Gulf. Man, like, if they do get what they're requesting right now in terms of the multi-pass and the ability, like if they're making these threats now, they've just confirmed that they have the ability to destroy the cables. They have the ability to close the Strait of Hormuz. They have the ability to obviously strike the entire Gulf. Very difficult to defend the entirety of the Gulf and the energy infrastructure like the Yanbu pipeline. The region will never look the same again. I know we've said this before, but like it's starting to hit me more and more as we have these discussions. And it seems the Iranians have already realized this. They've been saying this for a while. But I think for people from the outside, what I feel, people like me, it just took a while to hit me. Again, it's hard to tell what are negotiating positions, what will become reality. But it goes back to the point is, what choice does Trump have? Like I went back and forth with a guest yesterday to try to understand, what the Americans could do, try to see what leverage Trump has. But whenever I mention a point, when I say, all right, Trump can attack again, they say, Mario, what else could they do they haven't done? Like, they could cause more damage. Like, yeah, but this munition stockpiles are low, Mario, which are all good, fair points. So I don't, what options are there for the Americans to try to, force Iran to accept conceding these points?
Well, if your guess was that security expert, I can't remember his name right now, who you interview from time to time, he's right. He's really good at this. I saw that interview. We are in a position where all we have is bullets. And you can shoot 1,000 bullets. And I like to say, if bullets were a sign of political success, then Vietnam would be a raging democratic nation, which it is not. It is still a former communist, capitalist communist nation that is doing trade with us. But we lost that war. We dropped 3 times as many bombs on Vietnam has been dropped in all of World War II. If our bombs and bullets were all it takes to win a political settlement, then Afghanistan would be run by Mohammad Karzai, would be a democratic nation with a democratic lawyer Jirga. None of that exists. It's run by the Taliban because we never, ever, and I say this as an intelligence professional, okay, I get these idiots out there who are like, you're siding with Iran. No, I'm not. I'm trying to give you the reality that cultures that are not ours do not play by American rules. They do not have America's pressure points. They do not flex when America presses on a pressure point just because we have bombs. We literally used over half of the stockpile we would need in a general war with China to defend Taiwan. We don't have it anymore. It would take us 10 years to get back to the levels we need. So now we have expressed to the world our deepest vulnerabilities by Donald Trump's own personal narcissism. A thinking president would have thought through this and would have spent time negotiating a deal like Barack Obama's JCPOA. Everything that Trump wants right now, the JCPOA gave us. And as that cartoon that was out there with Trump and a negotiator says, Mr. Trump, why are you tearing that up? What's so offensive about the JCPOA? And he says, Barack Obama's signature. Well, now he's going to have to get it again. We are over a barrel. Military power cannot help us here. We've used everything, Mario, except the atomic bomb. And that wouldn't get you anything. That would just crash the global economy.
Crash the global economy, crash the US as a global hegemon, destroy all alliances, change the world in so many ways.
Which is why we don't talk about this, right? We don't talk about the N word. So, because it's crazy. That's mental illness. That'd be craziness. But right now, we have to face the hard realities of what America has done. instead of thinking their way through this, right? To come out and say, hey, listen, if we decapitate Iran's senior leadership all in one spot at one time, everything will change. Yes, they were correct. Everything will change. A guy like me, if I were on the senior intelligence staff of the White House and I had people that would actually listen to what I would say, hey, you know, you're going to kill a bunch of guys in their 80s and guys my age who have deputies that are in their 40s and 30s are going to take over. We're going to start doing clever shit, right? Things you haven't thought about, like bring those 33,000 boats out into the Gulf. And like yesterday, 100 IRGC craft showed up in the Persian Gulf yesterday off of Bandar Abbas as a demonstration of force. Tomorrow it'll be 200. They are out to bait us. And we are playing in that because we are going by not even old rules. The old rules would have been, and I always, people say, your experience in the 1980s doesn't mean anything. That's like saying your experience in World War II shouldn't have affected Vietnam, right? Yes, it should have, right? That's what wars are like. This is what experience is. The building blocks of not making stupid decisions. And we're in a place where in the 1980s, we did all of this. Tanker escorts, mine warfare. But the Strait of Hormuz never closed for shipping for one day at the height of when we were blasting the Iranian Navy out of the water. Because Iran has changed. They learned, have 1,000 anti-ship missiles, have 30,000 drones, have suicide boats. And now they have the capacity to dictate what happens in the Strait of Hormuz. And freedom of navigation operations, if I were the Iranians, I would let U.S. warships through. Just 2 or 3 at a time. I just let them through. Say, yeah, go ahead. Go on a port visit to Dubai. You have our permission. But everybody else, at any point, we could start shooting. And insurance rates will cancel your trip and nullify your cargo. And the world knows that now. America has made a strategic error in attacking Iran in this war in the way that they did, because they think killing individual people will topple a nation. No, they're going to go get another cup of tea, the rest of the country, and they're going to get a new leader.
So if you were in the administration right now and you were tasked with finding a military solution to ensure Iran does not control the Strait of Hormuz, what options are they? What bad options are they?
Well, they're all bad. Here's another thing. We only have 3 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers tasked onto this mission. We have 2 aircraft carriers. Each aircraft carrier has to have a minimum of 1 to 2 Arleigh Burkes with them, right? The rest of the ships in our task force, we have two of these LCS, right? Littoral combat ships, LITTORAL. They're broken. They are not good ships. The U.S. Navy's retiring them. They're right now holding a position near Chabahar, one ship, and another one down near the bottom of the Gulf of Oman, just so that they can provide radar coverage and a little bit of air defense coverage for ships that are going through trying to get through the blockade. They're what we would call a lily pad. But we've got 3 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers to run the SOH. Okay, when I did Operation Praying Mantis in 1988, Praying Mantis was the day we decided we were eliminating the Iranian Navy from the Persian Gulf, right? And we did it in one morning between 6 a.m. and noon. Every ship that was afloat in the Arabian Gulf was sunk. Boom, gone, except for high-speed boats. We couldn't get them. They chase them. They're just fast, right? But everybody that came out, we sank you and we destroyed them. But the point was, and then we turned it off. And we made it clear that was for today, and that was because you hit one of our ships with a mine. Okay, the Iranians got the message. But my task force had 3 ships. The task force next to me had 3 ships. The task force south of us had 3 ships. The task force in the Indian Ocean had 8 ships. We could have flooded the Strait of Hormuz with 20 frigates and destroyers. Where are all of our ships right now? Explain to me why all these bird dogs, that's what we call these ships that would go out and chase boats, why none have been brought over from the Pacific, None have been bought over from the Mediterranean. All the ships in the Caribbean that are out there right now are wasting their time. I would have had 24 high-capacity warships creating a wall of air defense in the Strait of Hormuz. And then we tell the Iranians, listen, you don't own it. We're not going to shoot at you unless you come out and do some stupid shit, right? But let tanker traffic move. Where you gotta talk sense into them. But no, everything that we've done has been, we own this place, we're muscle. You're just the beat cop, all right, on a Crips-ridden neighborhood who goes home at the end of his shift. Right? The streets are there.
Why do you think those warships are not in the Strait of Hormuz? Why are
I
they
have
scattered around the
no
world?
idea. I have no idea what's going on at the Joint Staff. Solutions that are basic. Look, I'm just senior enlisted. I'm not an admiral, right? But I'm the guy that would be giving admiral advice. And the first thing I say is, Admiral, where's our capability? We don't have any capability here. We have more amphibious ships right now in the Strait of Hormuz and in the northern Indian Ocean than we actually have guided missile destroyers that could go back and forth and that could establish an air defense barrier. Why isn't there a permanent Arleigh Burke sitting off of Khassab? Why isn't there another one off of Quain? Why isn't there one off of Dibba? And that's three ships holding.
Where are those cities? Which countries?
Oh, United Arab Emirates. So it would be a little arc, right? If this is the Strait of Hormuz, the top of the Musandam Peninsula, one at the top, one at the right, one at the left, and then keep them there. But you only got three, Mario. You only got three. They got to be resupplied. They got to go on station. They got to go off station. We should have had 9. We should have had 10. We have ships that aren't even there that should be there. And I just think of this as strategic incompetence. This is the most incompetent group of people I have ever seen. And, General Kane is a advisor to the president, but he will not decision make. He leaves everything to Pete Hegseth. Pete Hegseth was a National Guard major who was kicked out in disgrace. He doesn't know anything about naval warfare. I know more about land warfare than he does. But these guys are in love with themselves, and they think everything that they do is awesome. And South Park has done a perfect job of Pete Hegseth, right? Dudes, like, follow, subscribe, making content, not fighting a war.
What do you make of the British warship, the HMS Dragon? Yeah. What do you make of that heading to the region? Could we see a coalition now to open the Strait of Hormuz if the Americans cannot do it alone?
Not at all, because Keir Starmer has made it really clear that his election, all right, hinges on this. HMS Dragon has been deployed off of Cyprus, providing an air defense umbrella against further attacks on Cyprus, which, by the way, the thing that was attacked on Cyprus was RAF Akrotiri. And the only thing on RAF Akrotiri that was attacked was the hangars of the US TR-1/U-2 Dragon Lady strategic reconnaissance aircraft.
That's impressive targeting.
They hit it. They hit the hangar. We don't know if there were any damage to any TR-1s, but they went right down the middle of that hangar. And that's why British, French, Italian warships are there providing an air defense umbrella. I suspect Dragon is going to go down there to act as command ship afloat for what you will quietly see assemble, the same thing we saw assembled in Desert Storm and after Desert Storm and Ernest Will, which is a European minesweeping task force. You're going to get Danish, Swedish, Dutch, French, Italian, maybe even Ukrainian. The Ukrainians have 4 minesweepers now, right? The British gave them to them. Yeah, and they offered to go down and minesweep. And you may see all of them assemble into a minesweeping task force that the minute the MOU is signed, you're going to see this. The French aircraft carrier is going to come down there. The Italian amphibious carrier is going to come down there. I've seen all these ships in port in Abu Dhabi when I lived in Abu Dhabi. And they're going to establish a completely independent European minesweeping and security task force. The minute that MOU is signed, they're going to go to the Iranians with the Gulf states, and they're going to go, listen, we're going to clear the main traffic separation scheme of mines. And the Iranians don't need you to go through their multi-pass entryway. They can just send boats out, take your name down, and send you an invoice, right? And remind you that should you come back without paying your $2 million, we have the capacity to incapacitate your ship. So people are going to start paying up. But if that happens, we go back to February 27th with a, you know how they do, license plate billing for toll booths. That's what ships are going to have now.
That is insane, man. That is insane. How significant would it be if, from a geopolitical perspective, if they start cutting off the cables? There hasn't been any country that have done
That's
this at
not
scale.
funny.
You talked about, yeah.
That's not
That's
funny.
really scary, yeah?
No, that's Iran. That's a trump card. Sea mines and cutting those cables may be the two most powerful thing Iran has right now. And guess what? They're physical cables. You cannot go down with a cable layer and move those cables into Omani waters, right? You could damage them. You can't just lift them up, cut them, and then lift them up and put in a new one further geographically another place, or stretch them across the United Arab Emirates, because then they're vulnerable to ballistic missiles, right? Or drones or commandos, and then go across the Indian Ocean. Geography is what it is, but you go the fastest route, the most economically viable route. So Iran will never mention this again. I think they'll just keep that as a ... to everything they do in negotiations from this point. Where in an open parentheses that no one will ever say is, and we could cut off all the internet to the Middle East, Europe, and Asia.
That is insane, man.
That's asymmetric warfare at its finest. It's a it's a suicide bomber on an airplane, right? All you got to do is get on there, and you can greater impact than yourself. But I think it's brilliant in terms of strategy. But I think it's even more brilliant the Iranians didn't say a word about this until they're in their MOU negotiations.
Professor Morandi told me yesterday that he believes the military buildup shows that war is, he didn't say inevitable, but definitely significantly more likely than a deal, especially because both sides are on very different positions in the negotiating table. And they're not, it doesn't seem like Trump is willing to give the concessions that the Iranians need, which is control the Strait of Hormuz and enough concessions when it comes to sanctions. So that's his position. I remember he told me the same thing after the 12-day war. He's like, Mario, the war's not over. I dismissed it. I thought maybe he's just too worried, or he's just saying it because fits a certain agenda, and I was wrong. The war did restart, and significantly more than what I would have expected. A full-blown war started between the US and Iran, and now he's saying the same thing. Like, Mario, just for us, the war is not really over yet.
Yeah.
What do you make of that military buildup?
He's a follower of the Robert Pape, steps of escalation, right? Ladder of escalation. I believe in that too, but I also have to understand the perspective as it comes from our opponents. Now the third parties, which is all of the Gulf states, all right, the co-party of Israel. They are the wild card. All right. I know from time to time we joke around, and I'm going to give you a good example. There's this old Dave Chappelle skit of never, of what to do when you get pulled over by a cop when you're black. And one of the rules is never have your crazy friend in the car.
I've seen that one.
Right. Israel is the crazy friend in the car with a gun and cocaine, right? You saw the reporting from Channel 12 yesterday that they're prepared.
I saw that, man.
They are asking Trump to be prepared to, if the war restarts, to destroy every power plant in the country. We saw the beginning of that 8 weeks ago when they hit the Paris oil field, Paris natural gas facility. They were toying around Bushehr nuclear power plant by blowing up AAA guns 350 meters away from the nuclear power dome, the containment dome. When they bombed around Tehran and Isfahan and set fire to those oil fields, completely at odds with what Donald Trump wanted, right? He's the crazy friend. I'm gonna pull my gun out. That cop can't talk to me like that, right? I mean, you cannot maintain sanity if both countries are not speaking the same language. I've said it before. I'll say it 100 times on this show. And now I can be backed up by Joe Kent, who has way more access to top secret information than I've had in the last few years. Israel has its own agenda, and it does not match ours. They would rather Iran descend into full-scale civil war, break down by Baluch, Kurd, Azeri, and go into a heart attack mode to where the IRGC is fighting everybody, than to have that nation negotiate with us and cut a JCPOA plus 2-year deal. That's Netanyahu. I don't even think the people of Israel would want that, because that creates vacuums. Vacuums creates terrorists and terrorism.
I'm trying to find that article. I saw it, I think it was yesterday, about Israel. So essentially Israel threatened, do you remember exactly what it said? It was something along the lines of striking the entire energy infrastructure of Iran.
Everything in the energy infrastructure, everything.
Israel told Washington to bomb Iran's energy infrastructure into total destruction in 24 hours. Wow. Per Channel 12, Israel has conveyed a message to the U.S. advocating for a decisive shift in objective. Israeli officials are urging the U.S. to prioritize the complete destruction of Iran's energy infrastructure as the move that breaks the current stalemate. The Israeli position, as relayed by the sources, suggests the operation could be completed within a 24-hour window. The rationale is that rapid and total neutralization of Iran's energy sector would effectively cripple the economy, leaving Iran with no choice but to enter negotiations in a submissive state. It's like they didn't learn anything at all. This is maximum pressure scenario. It's they don't care, because then who suffers if that happens? The Gulf.
Oh yeah. I mean, if we didn't get the little hint when they hit North Paris gas field, right, and broke the cracking, the main machinery that was used to separate natural gas, the Iranians responded by destroying 2 water desalination plants in Kuwait.
Yeah.
2 out of 8, and making it clear we could make sure that you have to drink bottled water for the next 5 years. That you'll be bathing in seawater. They want to send those pressure points to Washington. Washington is supposed to bring Israel to heel. But again, using that Dave Chappelle analogy, you're handing the cop your license, registration, and insurance, and your buddy is pulling his gun out going, why are you talking to the man? I mean, it is a crazy scenario, but it is happening at a geopolitical level.
If they do that, how do you think Iran would respond?
I think
gloves off.
No. This is where, once again, go read 1001 Arabian Nights, right? This is the king versus the wise vizier, or the wily vizier, right? This is where he goes to the Gulf states and they go, you're going to ask the Americans to take all bases out. You are going to kick out the Israelis from the United Arab Emirates and break all your ties. The Abraham Accords is finished. Or we destroy every one of your power plants, every one of your natural gas plants, and we cut every damn cable. And then that scenario I always bring up to you that happened in 1987, we could storm across the Gulf and start a land war and determine who actually will control Mecca if you don't do this. That's unspoken, by the way, that last thing. The third Islamic civil war is what it would turn out to be. But that would be a very strong pressure point for Iran to go, no ballistic missiles are going to fly. None. All of their embassies go, kick the Americans out of the Persian Gulf, and we're going to let that slide. And you are going to help us reestablish power in our country. Abraham Accords finished. U.S. bases finished. No U.S.
They'll give a chance for the Gulf to turn on Israel before they go total scorched earth.
Yeah, but wouldn't you turn on it? I mean, I would turn on anybody if they did.
I think the Gulf has certain red lines. As upset as they are with Iran, they were also upset with Israel striking Qatar and now dragging them into this war. I think if Israel crosses that line, the U.S. and Israeli influence in the region would change forever instantly. Not only Israel, I think the U.S. as you said, all the bases would be kicked out.
Yeah, but the U.S. is probably preparing to move Central Command from Qatar to Uvda Air Base in Israel anyway. That's almost on the table right now. So, but that would be what Iran would do. I mean, as an intelligence professional, I would have to look, what would a moderately radical step that doesn't involve 500 ballistic missiles look like? Just diplomatically say, hey, this is not in your interest what just happened here. We need you to change the strategic balance. That Abraham Accords was you screwing Islam in the back. Look what's happening now. Women and children have no power, no water, no food. I could do that to you. Ayatollah Mujtaba Khamenei could say that. I could do the same to you. But, mashallah, we're all co-religionists. But there are some things that are red lines. Let's get rid of those Abraham Accords. Let's get rid of those Americans. You can still buy weapons, right? But you guys have to change your behaviors, and you got to help us rebuild these power plants. That would look insanely reasonable, wouldn't it?
What is the military option for Iran if they do want to go scorched earth? Let's say the Gulf don't accept the Gulf side, or most of them side with Israel and the US for the destruction. Let's say the Gulf, Israel, and the US all side together for the total destruction of Iran. They go with that option. What can Iran do?
Should this happen, here's what Mario Nawfal should do, right? Mario should immediately go to Carrefour, as soon as you hear about this, buy as much cased water, L-Ine water, as you can, right?
I'll be in Dubai International Airport. I'll be in the international airport.
No, you're going to watch this. Buy as much L-Ine water as you can. Fill your closets up and close the doors so that it's not exposed to sunlight. And you're going to have, that's how you're going to be bathing and drinking for a while. They're going to go to scorched earth. They may hit the Baraka nuclear power plant down near Ruiz. A lot of people, when I left the country, that thing was being built. It's online.
In the UAE?
Yes. Did you not know you had a nuclear power plant?
No.
Surprise. No. Get on the Highway 1
where's it
and drive straight
Dubai,
south to the Saudi border, and you'll see it on the right-hand side.
Wow. Is there other nuclear plants? Is there others in the Gulf? I'm guessing Saudi would have a couple.
Saudi has some research facilities. I don't know much about Saudi Arabia's nuclear power, but it's not big. But the point is, it's not as vulnerable. I mean, I got to be honest, everybody, listen to my sound of my voice. The UAE air defense has very, very much impressed me. I lived there for 10 years. I didn't think that they could handle what they've handled. But can they
only the UAE, by the way, the Barak is the only one in the Gulf. You're right.
Yeah, that's what I thought. But can they keep handling Iranian air defense? The burn through rate is phenomenal out there. And then if it goes physical, like you saw those boats attacking off the Strait of Hormuz, again, start landing in Quain. All of these crazy scenarios that you and I think are crazy, if I was a defense planner or an offense planner for the Iranians, they would not be crazy. They would be viable plans. I would actually have combat swimmers in their combat gear visible to U.S. satellites and drones, manning small boats, practicing with limpet mines near those cables. I wouldn't do anything, but I would make it visible that we could do this. And then, U.S. intelligence would go nuts.
You talked about the UAE's air defense systems. There was something I was thinking about yesterday. Do you think Iran tried to harm the infrastructure, the civilian infrastructure in the UAE? We saw the strike on one of the hotels. We saw the drone that got close to the Burj Khalifa. There was a couple of explosions next to my building as well. Is that Iran sending warning shots, or they genuinely, with the amount of attacks, they genuinely tried to cause damage to the touristic areas to scare people away, but the air defense is prevented?
Oh, no. They were trying to smash the United Arab Emirates. If you don't launch 500 ballistic missiles, all right, they expected that country to be burning from end to end.
Really?
Yes, very
no
obviously.
No wonder why the UAE is pissed as hell. No,
they underestimated the UAE's capacity to defend itself. Hell, I underestimated the UAE's capacity to defend itself. Look, they threw airstrikes at Qatar thinking this was 1986. But they've understood now how you defend yourself, how the Gulf states individually defend themselves. And they now know the easiest thing is what we call leakers, right? Send drones at very low altitude as ballistic missiles are absorbing all of your attention. Destroy your radars because you're not protecting them, you're protecting cities. The biggest problem with the UAE is all of their defenses are on, or have to fly over cities, and you can't hide that you're in an air defense mode when that's it. And you recall during the main part of the shooting war, they didn't like people knowing that ballistic missiles are being shot down all over the place. But I think that Iran intended to smash the United Arab Emirates, seriously. I mean, make it burn on TV end to end.
Oh, wow.
Hey, look, 2,200 drones, they were intended to hit, man. They weren't intended to be shot down.
But I didn't know how many of those attacks were on their energy infrastructure versus the military bases, the American military bases versus, touristic areas like Burj Khalifa and all the big towers here. So I wasn't sure what they were targeting. I was under the impression as well. I was obviously I was, at least back then, I was in the big building with the view. You remember the view? So I was in a big building, and I would, my partner would be telling me, Mario, like, should we leave? Because if the building gets hit, it starts to burn, it's really hard to leave it. My answer would be, maybe I was just naive. I'm like, look, I don't think Iran is targeting civilian infrastructure, but that's just me speculating, because all the interceptions, I don't know what they were targeting. And there were drones. There were strikes on a hotel. There were 2 attacks next to my building, as you know. And there was the drone. You remember that famous video of the drone that was intercepted next to Burj Khalifa? Burj Khalifa.
Right.
Mm-hmm. You don't strike Burj Khalifa unless you want to make it clear to the civilian, to the expats, that this place is not safe, to hurt their whole bubble of safety.
Well, I knew that they would hit, Burj Al Arab, Burj Khalifa. I'm amazed
they struck Burj Al Arab. They struck Burj Al Arab. I remember it was burning. Yeah.
And I'm quite surprised they didn't hit Mall of the Emirates, right, or Dubai Mall. Just the point is that those drones got through because they were in ground clutter areas where air defense doesn't work well, right? So they got through. They were the leakers. Sure, the first ballistic missiles attacks are going to destroy Sheikh Zayed military city, right? All of the air bases, police stations. The point was, though, make that country burn. UAE now has shown them we can defend against you in the aerospace dynamic, right? In the aerospace dimension. So they're not going to be shooting hundreds of ballistic missiles at you. They're going to let me rephrase that, re-engineer that. So, for example, if they want to go after the Baraka nuclear power plant, they'll shoot 100 ballistic missiles at that one target. Where all of your air defense.
There's no way to intercept it, is there?
Not all.
100.
No, concentrated fires. But the point is, they don't want to do this. The Iranians aren't stupid. This is literally camel soup trading, right? These are people going at it for advantage on a political solution.
What happens if a cruise of ballistic missiles hits the Burj Khalifa? How damaging would that be?
Okay, it depends. If it's a drone, light damage.
No, ballistic or cruise.
Ballistic missile. Yeah. Let's not even speculate about this. This isn't positive.
The damage will be significant, huh?
Significant enough you'll have to abandon the building. Jesus. Abandon it until structural engineers come out, or but this isn't positive stuff. I was in Washington. I watched the Pentagon get hit by an airplane, right? So these aren't things that you want to discuss, but you do have to think about in strategic planning.
I think it's important to discuss because it gives an idea. A lot of people are like, why is the UAE so hawkish against Iran? Why they're partnering with Israel for air defense systems? The explanation for this is, you might criticize UAE foreign policy, but they were doing business with Iran before this war, and they got pounded. And what you're telling me right now is that with that amount of missiles and drones, you'd want to burn a country or burn a city?
See, what I would do if I were advising Sheikh Zayed bin Zayed, I would say, listen, Iran's greatest vulnerability is this one thing. I mean, I've been to Dubai Creek many times from the early 80s until I lived there. And I always saw the same Dow traffic going to Iran. It's just a question of volume. I would make it economically in their interest to be a deep partner with the UAE. And that's, I used to give these speeches, these high-end speeches at universities. And they would say, Malcolm, what exactly does the average Iranian citizen want? And I can tell you what they want. They all want a 2026 Toyota Corolla, which is significant in the sense that they want greater trade. They want average things that you can get from the West. The IRGC does not want to surrender the values of the revolution. And if you can make them sort of like China, right, to where they can have their crazy radical ideology, but the economic value to them is so deep that the average citizen could not stand cutting off economic trade or ties. Trump tried this about 6 weeks ago when he floated this statement that we'll make Iran richer than beyond their dreams. America does not have that capacity because no one's going to deal with you. We've already showed we cannot be trusted in this. This is an economic situation which must come locally, right? This has to happen within the cultural confines of the Persian Gulf, to where those things that are going back and forth across the Gulf should not be cruise missiles. It should be more dhows, more cargo ships, more trade, right? That gives the average American, average Iranian, the feeling like we're being normalized into the world. And my goal that we've been hoarding in my family for 47 years, I can go take it down to the gold souk in Dubai and go get, new car, new TVs, new whatever. Also, it would take South Asia, and off the market in terms of where they get everything. Do you want them to buy it from the 6 new border checkpoints that opened up to Pakistan that are moving oil tankers, or Afghanistan or Turkmenistan, when it could those riches from the Gulf could all be flowing to Iran? That could happen if we get this peace deal, because that is a far better investment than trying to buy 4,600 Patriot interceptors. But those Patriots have already shown the Iranians, you're strong.
You'll need to do both, though, because you need deterrence anyway. You don't know which Iranian leader may be, off the rockers and start attacking the UAE. Do
the defense stuff, but right now, I'd buy them. Right? We have this old joke in the intelligence community when, they used to say, I used to get asked advice, how do you get an Al Qaeda member or ISIS member to give up his ideology? And I had this circumstance happen in northern Iraq in 2020 or 2006. And we had some jihadis that had kidnapped a prominent Iraqi, and the word got back to us. Here's what they wanted. They wanted to LTJ, leave the jihad. And they said, what was your advice? And the advice was pay them and make sure that you escort them to the Turkish border. Let them take their money, and they are no longer a terrorist threat to us. They are no longer paying money into the jihad, right? It works. Bringing people into the economic environment will de-radicalize them. The Saudis did this to Al Qaeda of the Arabian Peninsula, just bought them out, gave them cars, sent them to Mecca, do a Umrah. But we have to understand Iran's isolation is isolation, and isolation causes people to be crazy.
If you were advising, I know you already answered that in one way, but if you're advising him on security to maintain this air defense system, he's getting air defense systems from South Korea. The Crown Prince was in China. He's obviously doubled down on the relationship with the US and Israel. Is that, yeah, but I think more, maybe it could be political on the Chinese side rather than military. But do you think that's the right way to do it? Is have air defense systems from South Korea, the US, and Israel? Do you think doubling down on Israel just comes as the positives is obviously they have a really good air defense system. The negative is it pisses off Iran and other Gulf countries because Israel is not very popular in the region.
Well, I mean, look, the symbol of defense in every Gulf state country is the cross scimitars, right? You just make it clear. Hey, listen, we're going to defend against you. You now see that we're not even Israel, right? You can't hit us with the ballistic missiles that have penetrated the Israeli air defense system. Let's be honest. Those cluster munitions that have hit Tel Aviv were effective.
Why do you think they
Well,
didn't? Why do you think they didn't fire those cluster munitions on the UAE? That's another question I've been
because they
thinking.
wouldn't be effective, and it would be a waste of a strategic asset. But now, the Iranians know you're strong in air defense. Look, I've been to a lot of IDEXs, right? Abu Dhabi, in Defense Expo, and I have seen the Emirates buy Russian equipment, French equipment, British equipment, American equipment, all at one sitting. They like to diversify their systems, although all their Russian equipment's awful, and they're getting rid of it. And they should never buy another. But now, South Korea's air defense system is so good, the Emirates are bringing it in. The Australian airborne command and control radar system is so good, they're bringing it in.
Wow.
The Israeli, that's been there for almost 8 weeks now, providing
Well
it.
done,
The
Australia.
Israeli,
Well done, Australia.
yeah, but the Australians have been been quietly in the Emirates forever. They ran UAE Special Operations Command for like the last 25 years. So
are they capable? Sorry, because it's my home country, so I like to know.
Yeah.
Are they militarily capable? Very briefly, Australia, and then we get back to the UAE.
Yeah, they're very capable. Look at them. They got a country the size of the United States with a population that's half the size of the number of African Americans in America, right?
Yeah.
So they're pretty capable. But the most important part is they have a mindset that is different from other people. They have to defend vast areas, and their mindset is, if you've ever worked with the Aussies, get it done, mate, right? No bureaucracy, just get shit done, right? But I think using whatever the best systems in the world is, and then stitching this together and integrating it into a good command function is what they should do. There is some danger of bringing in Israelis, and because they're using Iron Dome. Iron Dome is now being used for the fragments. There is less danger bringing in the Ukrainian army to fly their drones. Even the Emirati-made Edge drones, right? Anti-drone drones, counter-drone systems. But the Ukrainians have experience. And the Emiratis have my late wife was landscape architect of Washington, D.C. They bought her because she had 30 years of experience, and they needed somebody who was at the pinnacle of experience. They now need the best of everybody. And that's what's going to keep you safe in the next round of attacks. They kept you safe just the other day when they did that little demonstration attack of 12 missiles or 3 drones and 2 missiles 2 days ago. So all the Gulf states, and we mentioned this on our last program, Mario, there is no GCC integration the way there is in NATO, where everything overlaps. If I were the Emiratis, if somebody, Mohammed bin Zayed said, Malcom, right? Appreciate you coming here. Have a drink over at Emirates Palace. Have an Emirates coffee. And tell me what you would do right now. I'd say, you need to step up as the leader of Gulf states defense and say, the UAE is going to pioneer integrating air defense from Basra to Muscat. Everybody together.
How to get MBS on board?
Yeah, he'll come along. He'll come along. You know how it works down there. Show strength. The next person will show strength.
Do you think the split between the UAE and Saudi is being overblown, or do you think it is serious?
No, it's overblown. It's overblown.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah, I think they may be tribal, but I just want to point something out to you. When the Emirates did all these crazy projects, right? Again, I speak about my late wife a lot. She was given a task to build a mountainside into an entire ski Swiss style resort, cover it in plastic, and build a mile-long ski run, right? In the middle of the desert at LI. That's crazy, right? But they thought about it and they spent millions of dollars developing it. The Saudis watched the Emirates develop, and then they started building their super projects. NEOM, The Line, mega projects, right? People who watch each other advance will not mimic, but maybe rhyme. And I think that whoever stands up right now and says Gulf defense needs to be integrated without the Americans. We have to assume the next administration won't side with us, or that they'll do it for their own interest, or that Israel will do something crazy and we have to suffer for it. Let's get the GCC air defense network nationalized, or not nationalized, but integrated, to where if we all buy South Korean air defense for medium range air defense, Qatar will help you. Bahrain will just buy it for you because Bahrain's too small. Bahrain's got money, but it doesn't have a lot of money. You know,
do they have? Do the Gulf have a lot of missiles, attack missiles?
Offensive missiles? No.
Yeah.
No. But they need to think about that too. You got to have punch. You know.
Yeah. They've only got the fighter jets. That's their punch.
Not unfortunately, that's an American way of thinking. Now watch Ukraine with these 1,000-mile, not 1,000-kilometer, 3,000-kilometer offensive cruise missiles like Flamingo. You can build those. You can build those yourself. Don't have to go buy Chinese ones, right? Don't buy Tomahawks because it'll take you 15 years to get them, right? There's a lot of stuff on the system out there in the world that could give you. You got to say, listen, the Americans might not be here, but you punch at us again, we'll have the capacity to punch back. And I don't mean flying Mirage 2000s over Lavon Island. I mean blowing up Card Island.
Do you think they did? I know we've asked.
I'm just saying that as an example. I don't want to say whether they did it because I haven't seen a good picture. Exactly. But somebody did it. But you know, buy HIMARS, buy the South Korean HIMARS or that new Swedish one, or that will throw a precision ballistic missile into Card Island and hit within 1 meter, 300 kilometers, 400 kilometers. You know, but you have to have an offensive. And I think now the Gulf states understand it. Our defense over the years, that investment has been very good. It's been very good. Navy, awful. Minesweeping, awful. That has to be buffed up in the future.
The Gulf as a whole, as a final question, the Gulf as a whole, if they come together, how do they militarily compare to a rebuilt Iran, a pre-war Iran?
They could be equal, minus the ballistic missiles. But, you know, to replace ballistic missiles, you don't need ballistic missiles. You need precision weapons. Okay, ballistic missiles are just spaceborne offensive weapons that can be clearly intercepted. So once you've got that Gulf shield up, then Iran's ballistic capability is neutralized. But then you also need to be able to punch back without the Americans or the Israelis. And then you say, listen, let's stop the Dow trade and let's start bringing container ships from Dubai to Bandar Abbas. Let's get that economic trade going for you. So everybody in Iran prefers to have peace than war.
Well, hopefully they can come together. Hopefully they can come together.
I hope so too.
Malcolm, thank you so much. Always a pleasure to have you.
All right. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
All right, guys. We've got Praveen, a regular on the show as well. You guys should know him. He'll be on in exactly 4 minutes. I'll be going live again. We'll be mainly focusing on the developments and the negotiations right now. There's a new story that came out of the CNN, according to Khamenei, and his influence on the negotiations. So I'm going to go through that with Praveen in a few minutes. We're also going to discuss some information on the Iranian economy and what we're seeing there. There's reports about an oil spill. Some are claiming that Iran is spilling oil intentionally into the ocean so they don't have to close the wells. I doubt that's true. There are strikes happening against the Kurds. There's strikes happening in Lebanon. Russia stepping up their support for Iran. And a few military points that will be interesting to discuss with Praveen. So we'll see you guys in about 3 minutes.